Hi, welcome to the new look tutorials. Hopefully they'll help you understand how to do things a little bit better from my tutorials. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, what I'm going to do today, because I'm a graphic designer and illustrator, I tend to use Photoshop and Illustrator quite a lot. One of the disadvantages of being in that situation is I tend to try and hope that the applications can resolve all the issues I may have doing my illustrations, whether it's in Photoshop or Illustrator. They are quite powerful tools, but one thing you want to consider is possibly using other tools to do more effective and creative work. And what I'm going to do today is look at three specific tools, these being Photoshop, Illustrator and SketchUp. SketchUp's quite a nice tool. It's a very simple tool to use. It's free for one kind of use. There is a pro version, but you can download it for free off Google, and it's quite powerful as a 3D generator. And what I did recently is an illustration for a company, and they wanted a building, and so what I did is I basically generated it in SketchUp and rendered it out and made it more effective using Illustrator and Photoshop. And what I'm going to do hopefully is to show you that today, but in a more simple form. Okay, so what we're going to do is go to the first application we need to use, but before that I want to show you the image that I'm going to base my 3D modeling on. I'm going to put a piece of text here. Okay, it's going to look like it's standing on the actual concrete. It's going to come up and it's going to have the right perspective and it's going to have a shadow. Okay, that's all fair and good. So we're going to get started. I'll just hide that. Okay, the aim here is to hopefully wow you and knock your socks off a little bit. As I said before, I don't usually use SketchUp, especially for illustration. So I'm going to hopefully see if I can show you how you can use this in an effective way. I showed you a picture before. I'm going to give the impression of having some text sitting outside the building. Now there's two ways of doing this. I'm going to open my picture that I have. There it is. Inside preview. This is a complicated way of doing it. Basically I can have my picture there so I can refer to the angle, like so. Saying that, this is the other way I found out yesterday when I was testing this. It's also complicated, but basically I'm just going to enter some text. Should be on bold. Okay, it's A, letter A, and I've extruded it to 4 inches. Basically what it does is it places it in the center of your object, and I'm just going to resize it a little. That's a little, like so. Just zoom out, like so. What you can do, let's get rid of that, and there is, if you notice when you orbit, it's sort of flat on the ground, and you can test this out by going and putting the shadows on. You can notice the shadows appear. What you can do is just set your shadows to the way you want it, like so, and then rotate your object. You'll notice when you do it from a certain viewpoint, you'll see that you can't snap to the red, which is the one you want it to change to. But the way you do this is if you literally just click and hold, you'll notice you can snap it to the red axis. Now I'm just going to zoom out a little bit so I can then twist it so it's on the right axis. You notice the shadow stretches. Okay, I just need to drop this down so the shadow is flat on the ground, like so. Now what we can do is just change our rotation, like so. So the font is roughly in the same perspective. You'll notice if I zoom up, it's still not touching the ground exactly. Okay, one thing you can do is if you go to model info, you can snap off these two under units. This is your snapping option. You may find that your model moves a little bit more smoother. Okay, you notice the perspective isn't exactly the same because of the angle there and the angle there. If it's going to appear roughly here, it needs to tweak a little bit. So what you can do is just go to field of view. What that does is it allows you to twist the perspective, because it's changing it from a wide angle lens to a isometric lens. Okay, so we want it to be around about there. Okay, that's one way of doing it. I'm going to just show you this in Illustrator. Okay, what we need to do is make sure we place it in the center, roughly with the right angle of the ground. Like, let's say that's about okay. All right. Now, just go to, the reason I'm using SketchUp rather than doing this in Illustrator is if I zoom in and click this, one thing we can do is edit the component, and something you can't do in Illustrator is this, which is to drop the extrusion of the text inside the actual object. Now if I do that again, I won't do it again because I want to have a flat surface and show you something else. Now if I just zoom out, put this back again in the right plane roughly. Oops. Like so. It's kind of correct. Okay, let's just zoom in a little bit. That needs to twist up a little bit. So you notice that the shadows cutting into the object now. So let's just make it so we can select the component. We just need to move the component up a tad, like so. And it's just floating above it, doesn't really matter, it's just a test one. Okay, if you want to perfect this you can do it a little bit better. Okay, that's roughly correct, I believe. Okay, so what I can do now is, if I just hide all these down a second, like so, and stretch my window so I can see all the shadow, I can save as an export to 2D graphics. Now there's a reason why I want to keep the shadow and the lighting effect. What I'm going to do here is to save it as a JPEG first. So I'm just going to call it A, put it on my desktop. That's saved, and I'm going to do exactly the same without moving anything, and save it as an EPS. That's that. You'll notice you've got options on the EPS. What we want to do is to keep the point size quite small, so I'm going to put it down to 2.5. I think that's the minimum. Okay, and press OK, and then export it. Oops, let's make sure I call it A, like so. Now that's what we need to do inside SketchUp. We're going to bounce into Illustrator now, and I'll do the next part. So here we are in Illustrator. I'm just going to open the file that I just made as an EPS. If you remember, it's on my desktop, called A. There it is. Okay, so I'm going to open it. And what you'll notice is you'll have a complete copy of that model that you just made in SketchUp as some line work. Okay, you notice the lines are quite small. Okay, one problem you'll notice, though, if I zoom in, yeah, you'll notice it's got all this blocky effect, which I don't particularly like. And also, if I open up the layers, you'll notice that each object is a separate object, you see, which you don't want. You want all the black to be merged together. So what I figured out you can do quickly is, if you just get your magic wand tool, put it to 0 tolerance, okay, you can just select all the black. Okay, and you notice it's got different thicknesses. I just want it to have the same thickness, which is 0.25, which changes everything. And whilst I'm there, I'm just going to make a new layer and then just drag everything onto a new layer. So now we have those separate from those. Now, let's just say you wanted to have the illustration without black lines. You can obviously use it. You can actually separate the two, like I say. I'm going to show you how to do it with the black lines, just so we can see how it's going to operate. But you'll notice at the moment we haven't got any shadows. I'll talk to you about that later. But what we need to do, because I want to show you some tricks, is to separate the two front layers. Make a new layer. Just drag it. That's the big inner surface. Okay. Do it again for the outer big surface. So what I'm going to do actually is to separate the two variations on the lighting as well. So I'm going to use my magic wand again. That's all the shadowed areas, like so. And then I'm going to choose those which are the highlighted areas, like so. Now you'll notice the base one should be just completely empty now. Okay. What we can, no, I won't name them. You can name them like I usually do when I'm using Illustrator for the different sections. But because this is a test, I don't want to waste time in the video to do this. Now, I'm just going to close all the coloured ones down for the time being. Again, zoom in on the corners. You notice because it makes it as a stroke of a line, you don't join the corners together properly. So what we can do is if we just expand the stroke, and actually most of them are connected. You notice some of them aren't connected, so what we can do is just go to Pathfinder, click this option which is Unite, and it joins everything together. And whilst I'm in this part, actually I'll show you what I'm going to do. That's the highest zoom actually. So what I'm going to do is to just delete the unnecessary parts of the line. So what we're left with, you notice unfortunately it does that. So what we have to do is to expand that out like that. Okay, because I want to have it having effective clean corners on everything, like so. I'm going to do that to all of it and then come back so you can have the finished object. Okay, be about 5 minutes. So what I've done is I've actually cleaned all the corners, so all the white cut-ins have disappeared. And let's zoom out again. Go back to my layer, switch everything on. You'll notice we've got a letter A. Okay, this is where we have to jump into Photoshop. So we have to have both next to each other. So I'm just going to reduce the window size and then, oops, made a path by mistake. Okay, put it over to there. So I'm going to have the other window here. Okay, so when I come back I'll be in Photoshop and Illustrator. Okay, if you remember, I said we're going to go into Photoshop and Illustrator. I've got them both open. This is the picture, if you remember, that we're going to be manipulating. And this is the text that I want to place here and add some nice effects to. Okay, so what we're going to do is, and the reason I've actually separated everything is to drag them all over, and I think you probably guess this if you know anything about Photoshop, as smart objects. Okay, and place them, and then we can manipulate each one separately. Okay, so I'm going to go from the top down. So, oops. Basically, I'll just select the object and then literally drag it over to Photoshop, and it will appear as a new layer in Photoshop. Okay, now because I can't actually do anything about the actual sizing at the moment, I need to just press enter to make it into an object. Zoom in because I need to be able to place the other one behind. This is going to be a, oops, no, what I can do, I'm just going to delete that. You notice it's way too small. So what I can do is quickly go to Illustrator, select the whole lot, and then make it a reasonable sized letter, like so. And now do the same function. What should happen now is that you'll notice that the A is bigger than what we want it. It's kind of roughly in the angle that we want as well. Press OK on that, and then just go down each of the objects, dragging it into Photoshop. We don't need to even put them in the right place at the moment, as long as they come in. Like so. And the final one. So what we could do, just quickly save the A as an Illustrator file. And then we can quit Illustrator. Don't need it anymore. Open Photoshop. You notice on our layer palette we've got several vector objects, vector smart objects. What we need to do is make sure that they're in the right order. So I'm going to put A at the top and just reposition them basically so they're all set so we can actually layer them properly. Now let's just zoom in onto this part here. I'm just going to get the first one, which is this one, and just place it so it's behind the letter A, like so. That's about correct. And do the same with all the other objects. So final one. Need to figure out where the there it is. Okay, so we've got all our objects in the picture. As I said, it's a little bit too big. I think it could be okay actually. I don't know. Maybe I'm just going to reduce it a little bit. So I've just selected all my layers, press Ctrl T, and I'm just going to shrink it down a tad, like so. You notice the angle there. It's quite nice. Okay, so I've got all our objects. Now, you could have done that in Illustrator, apart from the beveling. What we need to do, do you remember I did the shadow? What I'm going to do is bring that in now, that other image that we had. So open, it should be on my desktop as a JPEG. There it is. Now that should be the same position as the A that we've got. So I'm just going to select all and copy it, take it over to here, paste it. As you know, it's a bit too small, so what we're going to do is enlarge it. And you notice what we want to do is match it up to exactly the same position as the actual one we're using, but it's got lots of white. So how can we resolve that problem? Even though we're actually transforming it, we can actually turn this to multiply, which means we can then see the objects beneath. Okay, like so. And we can now just manipulate the image so it becomes the right size, like so. Like so. A little bit more. It doesn't matter about the A too much. I think I'm going to delete the A. I just want to keep the shadows. And you notice, whilst we're in this mode, actually it looks quite nice as it is. Okay, that the actual shadows look like the part of the surface and everything. It's not exactly perfect, but good enough that it's actually an effective A sitting inside the area. Okay, there's a few other things we can do to this. Let's just enter that so it's all set. As I mentioned before, I want to create some kind of textured effect onto the surface. Now what we can do, let me go. There is a thing in here where you can actually apply texture, pattern overlay. I don't want to do that. I want to do it in a different way. So I found a picture of some concrete. I can't remember what it's called actually exactly. Texture. Okay. So I'm going to open that. It's in my download folder. Texture. There it is. Concrete source. Like so. It's got some cracked concrete. So what I want to do is apply this to the surface. I'm going to apply it to most of the surfaces actually. So I'm going to press Command A again, copy, close that down, paste it onto my picture. It's obviously very big. That's the thing you need to notice about when you're finding textures, is to keep them so that they're the biggest form you can. Okay, and whilst I'm here, I'm going to transform this by going to Distort, and make sure then holding the corners down I get the same perspective as I do as the A angles, like so. I'll just be back. And we just need to make sure that this is all lined up. It doesn't have to be exact because it's just a texture, you're not going to know the difference, but it gives a kind of an impression of the perspective. That's the point. Okay, so we're happy with that, and I just put that straight up again, press enter. The texture is aligned properly. Now we want it cutting out into the A. Okay, so what we've got to do is find the let's just close that down, the inner part of the A, which is that one. Okay, what I'm going to do is just literally press select all and then my arrow keys. I'm going to make sure this is just above, the texture is just above, and it's actually selected. And what I can do now is go down to the layers palette here and just create a mask, and it basically cuts out everything. And you'll notice you've got the texture on there. Okay, as you'll notice, this hasn't got a texture, so I'm going to do that again. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this layer. So disconnect the layer mask. Okay, and because that's at the same angle, I want to do the same there. Okay, which was that one. Yep. So what I'm going to do is make sure that's above. Select that one. Do exactly the same as I did before, like so. So they've both got textured maps now. What you notice though is because of the way that it bevels, this is not actually following the same angles it would when it was beveled, because basically it's just literally taking the same path. This is one reason to make them separate. What you could do is you could alter the position of your texture just to give it a slight offset. Okay, so it looks a little bit different to, you know what I did? I forgot to disconnect the layer mask. So you can use the texture separate from the mask. Okay, so we've done that. Let's just lock it again. So what I want to try and achieve now is to do this other surface. So you remember I've still got it in my clipboard. I'll put the tag in again, just zoom it down so it's roughly the right size, and then just go to distort again and just make that the same angle as the letter A, like so, making sure it's vertical. Don't make the mistake of actually putting it so that it's actually got the same angle as the oh, actually maybe, because that's actually deformed, we need to do it that way, like so. Just press enter and it's all ready to go, and we just need to apply the mask. So I've got to put it on the right masking layer, making sure it's actually covering the whole of the A. Okay, and it's, I believe it's, oh, I have to switch that off first. I believe it's this one. So let's just put it above this one. Copy it all. Make the mask. There you go. Put it on again. What we have is quite an effective looking it looks like it's built out of concrete. Okay, which is quite nice. It's got the outer edge, and you'll notice actually if I just do that, it looks okay, but it hasn't got the right feel with the shadowing everything, and that's why if you put that back on, it's got the shadowing applied to the actual surface, and you don't actually need the black outline object, but you'll notice it's all correct. So when I come back, I'm going to show you how to just touch this up and make it look a little bit more better. Okay, this is our A shape in our picture. What I want to do is just to show you some other little things you can do to make it look a little bit more interesting maybe. You'll notice the photograph's got a kind of a softness to it, which the text hasn't. So what we could do is soften that, and I'll show you a way to do that in a quite an interesting way. We can do something with a shadow, which I'll talk about in a bit, and also you'll notice that certain lighting effects could occur based on the fact that the light's coming from above. This area will be softer than it is there. Okay, so I'm going to go through these and just show you how you can make it look a little bit more improved. Start off with an easy one. I'm going to pick the line layer. That's the one with the line. Okay, I'm going to choose my magic wand and make sure contiguous is on. Sometimes it's switched off and sometimes it isn't, but make sure it's switched on. What that does is it allows you to select a whole area. If I'm going to switch it off, if I select the same area, notice it selects everything. If I just switch it on, it selects the boxed area that's inside the black line. Okay, so what we want to do now is just make a new layer. Just make sure it's above the object we want to use, which actually is this one. Fill it with white. It's interesting it's white because what it's doing there is actually pulling the main colour of the object now, which is from this picture. So it's white underneath, and so it's just showing the white. So for what I'm going to do is make that multiplied, which means the white disappears, and then I'm going to go to the effects palettes and choose gradient overlay. Now instantly it does the same thing again because it's got white there, which means it's showing the actual shadow layered again. So what we're going to do is go to multiply, which means it gets rid of it again, and we can knock down the opacity quite a lot. And also what we can do is if we click there, we can bring this further down so the black's just touching the bottom part of the, change the angle slightly, like so. And so what you'll notice now, well, it's very subtle, but it's darker here than it is there. Okay, it's a slight change, but you never know. It may be something that makes the image look a little bit more realistic, especially if you spend time building it up. Now the next thing I want to show you to do is we're going to take the inner edge, which is this one actually, like so. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to put it above the actual concrete texture, and again what I'm going to do is do a colour overlay this time and put it onto multiply. Choose blue or something like so, and what I'm going to do is knock down that. Now for some reason I've got to put the actual layer on multiply as well. Okay, forgot to do that. What you'll notice is what I can do is to colorize the actual textures then. So if you wanted a blue inner, for instance, because it's part of an advert or something and it's important that the inside is blue, you can do that. Okay, and so forth. And so you can see you can actually slowly build up the actual object to make it look quite nice. Now I mentioned about the edging. Let's just say for instance we want to get rid of the vector edging. What we can do is select the shadow layer that we've got the shadow on down here, yeah, just a little neat trick you can do is if you go to the blur tool and literally just go around the edge of your object, it basically softens the edge of the line and makes it look more like it's actually part of the picture. Now you can do it just to the edge if you want to, or all of it, like so. And you're saying to yourself, why are you doing it using the blur tool and not the Gaussian blur? Because I want to show you something I want to do with the shadow in a minute, and if you Gaussian blur it all, it's going to knock it all out completely. Okay, so I'm going to soften everything around here. Like so. It's just a little way to help it blend with the background. Like so. You may not notice the difference, but it is there. Okay, and another thing we can do, if you look at any natural shadows, it's sharper on the edge than it is towards the end of the actual shadow. So what we can do as well is to soften. That's why you can't do Gaussian blur, because it's not going to allow you to do what I'm doing now, which is to soften one end and then keep the other end sharp, like so. And you just keep going over it and over it until it's gone very soft on the far end of the object, and then just you can actually soften the shadow at the top end a little bit, like so. Like that. Okay, and it just makes it look a little bit more natural. Okay, and the final thing I just want to do is to show you on the, it's this layer, you can actually apply lighting effects. You'll notice under render it's got lighting effects. What we can do is actually, let's put it into a position where it's, see, that's needs to be the other way around. You want it brighter at the top corner, like so. Just press, okay. And you'll notice it's gone a little bit lighter than it is there. It just gives them maybe another more natural look to something. Okay, and that's basically it. You know, you can build it up and play with it as much as you want to. You could soften this edge and not this edge on the textures, darken the shadows here. Like for instance, what I could do, put this back on again, get my thing. Actually, I could do it both edges at the same time. Switch it off again. Now on the top layer, what I could do is just put in a kind of a soft grey, like that, middle grey, like so, and then put that on to multiply again. And you notice what it's done is actually darken that area, because it may actually help you understand that the actual block has a incut, which is stronger than the shadow that would be there. So if you remember, if I took it off, it's basically the same tone. Because it's inside, makes it look a little bit harder and stronger. And I can do that in quite a lot of several places. Like if I do, as I said, this is just a quick example to show you how it all works and everything. Look, it's quite effective, I think. Actually, one thing I just noticed, I'm just going to do it just to perfect it, is just to soften the edge of the shadow on the inside. Like so, and just there. There you go. Quite happy with that. So hopefully you've learned something using SketchUp, Photoshop and Illustrator together. You can end up with quite an effective creative design for an image or an advert. You can imagine having text along the wall or whatever. Maybe I'll do another tutorial to show you how to place it against walls and things later as well, and how to do extra things to the text inside SketchUp as well. Okay. You can also check my blog as well for more tutorials.